The history of marbling is it started about maybe 1,000, 1,200 in Persia, which is now Iraq and Iran. And probably in the 1400s, 1500s, it began to transition over to Europe. And sort of Germany and the Netherlands and England became sort of centers for marbling. And originally in Persia, one of the main purposes was to write legal documents. They would marble a piece of paper, write a legal document, and if anyone tried to change it, these patterns were so delicate, it would smear, or you could obviously see it very easily. In Europe, it became actually part of the bookbinding process. And this is a book from my grandfather's library in the late 1900s. And the cover is a marbled pattern and embossed paper. And then on the inside, sort of as a transition between the cover and the pages of the book, they'll put a marbled piece. And this is actually a marbled pattern of marble, which is where marbling gets its name from. And it became a very popular thing. It was basically done by guilds and kept pretty much as a secret as far as the process goes. Quite often marblers would work at night, so people couldn't figure out how they would do this. And it was a very lucrative kind of profession. And as printing sort of developed, marbling went out of favor. And basically the art form was lost. And then in the 1960s, there were a group of artists who began to become interested in this, revived the art form with modern kind of paints and supplies and what have you. And the 60s was, this wave of artistic development, including wood turning. And there became this profession of professional marblers. And if you think it's hard to make money in wood turning, you should try marbling. So anyway, that's a little bit of the history. As far as the supplies go, and I'm going to talk about the supplies and how you mix things and everything. And there's a couple references here, a couple books on marbling, which tells you a lot about how to do things and what the patterns are and what have you. And during the day there'll be some downtime, so feel free to peruse the books and what have you. Okay, so what is marbling? It's floating paint on a gelled surface and then drawing very complex patterns with very simple tools and then printing that on the surface. And as printing became more important, sort of marbling phased out. And it almost was lost in history. And then in the 1960s, a bunch of people who were interested in marbling sort of revived it, adapted it to modern paints and techniques and what have you. And sort of the 60s was, that's also when wood turning really started to become an art form, and a lot of other things. And so there was this group of marbling artists who recreated the whole art form. And then new printing techniques evolved, and so now you can have printed patterns of marble patterns that are much cheaper, and so it's a niche kind of art. You give me that? Yeah, that one. So there are probably, make that another, the book. Yeah, that one. There are some references for marbling, and there are a couple of good books which I've brought. Take a look at them. You can even borrow them as long as you guarantee that you bring them back. But there are probably 50 marbled patterns that if you're familiar with this art form, you would know those right off. And it's a very disciplined thing. And if you want to make those patterns, there's a routine that you have to go through. And when let me go through and tell you about, very briefly, the kind of things that you need to marble. And the first thing is you need a gelled surface. And there are a couple of them that you can use. The most common one is carrageenan. And that's the one that I've focused on. I think it's the easiest to use. And carrageenan, it's a white powder. It's made from Irish moss. And you have eaten an incredible amount of carrageenan in your life. It's a food substance, and it's used to thicken things like ice cream or soups or gravies. And if you look at the packaging of some of the things in your kitchen, it'll say carrageenan on it. And basically it's a white powder. You mix it with water in a high-speed blender. You use 2 tablespoons for a gallon, and it takes about 24 hours to settle down. When you first mix it, it's very frothy and bubbly, and bubbles are one of the enemies of marbling. But after about 24 hours, you have a nice, clear, smooth surface. The paints, and there are a variety of kinds of paints that you can use. Some people like golden paints, others like European imported paints. I use all of my marbling stuff. I get it from marbleart.com, Marble Art USA or US. And you can fool around with a lot of different kinds of paints or carrageenans or other things. And this is an outfit that's run by a professional marbler called Galen Berry. And I think the thing that I like about working with Galen is he's a professional marbler. He does this full time, and all of his things work together. I don't really want to spend my time experimenting with different kinds of paints or, carrageenan versus something else and everything. So I just buy everything from Galen, and it seems to work together. He also supplies the different kind of combs and rakes that you need. And this is a comb, and basically it's a piece of wood with pins on it. And they're spaced perfectly 1/4 of an inch apart. And Galen has a jig to do this, and it's just easier to buy it from him than trying to figure out how to do it. You also have certain rakes, which are, now this one I made, they're nothing more than finishing nails, spaced evenly. And then, there are different, this is a 1/4 inch comb, this is a 3/8 inch comb. So yeah, there are a few things like this. But really for, under $100, you can get yourself set up for marbling. I'm going to show you how to do a pattern. And in doing that pattern, you'll actually learn how to do 3 or 4 different kinds of patterns. These patterns sort of build on each other. And the first pattern I'm going to print on paper, just to test everything out. And then the second pattern I'm going to try and print it on a piece of wood. Dust or a hair, when you make your patterns, will drag through the pattern and become very apparent. So those are the things that you want to eliminate the most of. And so now here you have a bubble. So you want to get that out of there. You can sort of get it on the side. There are 2 ways of skimming the surface. One to get the color off, which you sort of have this, what do you call it? I don't know, piece of wood. And we'll eventually scrape this after we do a pattern to get the color off. Just using newspaper to skim the surface usually takes care of the dust and any alum that might be left on the surface, and just clean it up. The carrageenan is really clear, so you can see through it, and it's sort of hard to see what's on the surface of the carrageenan versus what's underneath. So if something is underneath, it doesn't matter, because all you're concerned with is the surface. And it's hard to see what's on the surface, and that's why you just continually use newspaper to skim it.
Yeah, there's also the swirls.
Yeah.
That might be already.
You might not even get close to it.
Okay. See, and like this is underneath the surface, so,
Ah.
and there's some,
Is that underneath the surface?
yes, that's underneath the surface. And I was doing some patterns this morning, and probably the Arte color has dropped down to the bottom. And one of the things you need is ox gall, which actually is a thinner for the paints. And in days of old, they actually used ox gall. Now it's some kind of a photo, something that's used in photography. That's a thinner. It works quite well. And you just need to put a drop or a drop or two, and it'll thin the paint very well. If you put too much in, it just sort of spreads too far.
And how do you know that you need to thin your paint?
Well, what you do is now these paints settle out very quickly, so you need to stir them constantly. And you take a drop and put it on the surface, and you can see here now that's about 3 inches. So that's perfect. Okay. Now I was having problems with the indigo color, so we'll see how that's.
More than 3 inches.
That's way more than 3 inches. So that's a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the indigo paint, stir it up. Now I think I put like 2, maybe 3 drops of indigo paint in there. So it wasn't very much. Might be that this is just,
Too thick.
Oh, that's your
See,
problem.
It's still, yeah.
It's,
Oh, that was,
well,
Well-
that's, yeah, it's water-based, but it's, you have to work on it. You just can't dip it in. And okay, so that's how you test the paints. Yeah, that's spraying a lot too. Didn't make that. That's okay.
they're all getting about 5 inches.
Yeah.
what's that one called? It starts with a V.
It's
Valderall.
Viridian.
Oh,
Viridian? Viridian? It's green.
It's going out to- What's the float time on the paint before it starts sinking? You know how much
I don't
shelf life
know
or whatever
exactly,
paint time?
but you don't want to do a pattern and then stop for coffee. You
okay,
know,
the red one is not very, that's thicker, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the least spread.
Does temperature make a difference?
Yes. You want the Kerrigan cool but not cold. And the temperature will make a difference.
They all look very good.
Mhm. I just feel like I'm back in preschool. Playing with colors.
They're all spreading pretty well. Okay. Well, as they say,
Do you go all the way to the bottom to skim it
No.
off?
you,
Look at how intense the color gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
When you skim the surface, you just want to, go like 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
And because the paint should be floating just really on the very top of the surface. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, the first color you always use is black. If you leave the black and don't put a lot of paint on, it'll actually print gray. But we're going to put on enough color where the black will actually be compressed and form lines that will outline your pattern and not show up. If you don't use black, you'll get a more paisley or lighter color. So black will make it more vivid. Okay, so you don't want to put a lot of paint on your brushes. And the idea is you want to get a lot of little spots rather than big ones. And that'll make your pattern.
And if you don't get any black on an area, what happens?
It'll be more of a, not a, is it paisley or?
Pastel.
Pastel.
It'll be more pastel.
You had one that was real light. I think it's over in your piles there.
So
Okay.
that was 4 passes with black. I'm just,
And you can look at, see this, and you know, it's not real dark.
so that would be one you would use on a really light mantle, maybe. I don't either, but
Yeah.
okay. Next color, is that ochre?
It's an ochre.
Okay.
So you've got black and over.
And
No, you're correct.
you know, I have a number of patterns over there on the corner of the table. And you're so you know, you can take a look and see what kinds of
Oh, wow. Look at this.
I love
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is wave,
That's what I was thinking.
something blue, russet, and verd. Okay, now you're doing the red color, not bright red,
russet.
russet.
Oh, I forgot, I should have mentioned, you always put the black on first. And if you're using red, you put the red on second. And red is the most difficult of the colors to try to control. And quite often it will come out pinkish rather than red, especially if you do not put it,
Oh, red, yeah. And he would like it, we all like it.
put it on as the second.
But you have 2 different colored reds. Do you have to do that with both of them?
No, only the bright red.
Oh, right, right.
The russet is fine, and I sort of like the ochre,
Ochre, I like it too.
and the russet, because we always are dealing with wood.
And it's a blending color with cherry in particular.
I like the indigo. I'm a little concerned with the way it's spreading. I like the turquoise.
So you're on your 5th color, including the black. What do you generally, how many do you usually do?
Yeah, I would say you probably want to use at least before.
Okay.
And
And you're predominantly spreading color in the middle because that's where you're going to dip.
well, I'm also trying to get it over on the corners, the four corners, because I'm going to print this on paper. So I
Oh,
want
wow.
a nice even one.
Okay.
If you were doing a large, you know, I can do a 14-inch bowl on this one. And if you're doing a 14-inch, okay, so you know, that's not spreading.
One that was spreading too much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be a
Well,
nice effect though.
as
I
you
think.
get more paint on the surface,
It has
it has a
less room.
tendency to spread less. That's one philosophy. The other philosophy is the ones that you put on at the end or in the beginning get compressed more. So, you know, I'm not too sure which one is right. So we've spotted out everything,
6 colors, including
6
black.
colors. Now we're going to start,
And you go all the way to the bottom, it looks like.
you can go all the way to the bottom. I just,
Back and forth.
and this is called a zigzag pattern in the parlance of,
And you always pick it up at the end. you know.
well, okay, so as I was saying before, if I was doing a 14-inch bowl on this, I would want the pattern to be the same throughout the surface. So I would be very careful to pick it up and put it back in. If you're doing a smaller piece that's going to focus on, you know, let's say a 6 or 8-inch pattern, then you can more focus on the middle. Or you could do a whole pattern and then see which part of it you like and print that part.
Let Bob use the other small ones
Mhm.
for his ratings.
So the only reason I'm hesitating is, it appears that the indigo is not really mixing with the other paints.
Maybe you have to put it on earlier.
Well, that could be. And that's part of the randomness of this process.
It'll never turn out exactly the same.
Right. Yeah, or, you know, it's probably going to be the same today, but it may not be the same tomorrow or something else. And, you know, that's not, you know, like here, these colors are sort of mixing together nicely. These are getting all little dots and what have you, so I don't, you know, maybe if
Because of the end
put it on
like.
earlier in the pattern. Now this is called a zigzag pattern, or a gitgel pattern in marble parlance. And this is, now I don't think this is a very good zigzag pattern because the blue is spotty. But this is, you know, if it was a better zigzag pattern, this is a valid pattern that you can use. And this is one that would be consistent on a platter. You know, I would probably do this again, either putting the blue or the indigo first, or not at all. And the way these colors are set up, the ochre and the russet are more the gray, The indigo, turquoise, and blue are more in that shade. Actually, the teal and the viridian are sort of more greenish and complement each other. And then you have yellow and red that sort of stand out. And I probably should, I would have put probably some yellow in it instead of the indigo. So anyway, now we have a comb. You can have a 1/4 inch comb or a 3/8 inch comb. And the sample patterns that I did, you can see some are the 1/4 inch, some are the 3/8 inch. On a smaller piece, maybe you want to do the 3/8 inch. On a bigger piece, you might consider or no, on a smaller piece, you want to do the 1/4 inch. Bigger piece, you may want to consider the 3/8 inch. Okay, so you want to put this in the top. You don't just have to put it underneath the surface. I like to keep both of my fingers on the sides and just very calmly and consistently bring it down. Now this is correcting for the spotting on the indigo. Although you're getting a lot more indigo here than up in the other areas. And this is called a non-pariel, I think. I don't know how you say that.
I hear that word.
And this is a pattern that you see on a lot of wrapping paper, cards and what have you. This is a very classic mark-length pattern, and you could print this, right? And this is used as a basis for creating a whole host of other patterns. And I'm going to use a single rake, and I'm just going to very carefully go up and down, maybe make about 5 passes, and it'll turn this into what's called a bird wing pattern. Okay. Other patterns that you can do with this is there's one called the peacock pattern, which you do a swirl down from the top to the bottom, and you have to use a double rake to do that, and it takes a lot of practice to do a peacock because it's going to be a precise motion. But the bird wing is probably the easiest to do, and we're just going to start on the side and very smoothly
And slow.
and you don't want to go too far up and down.
I guess if you went a lot up and down, that would just be a different pattern.
It would be a different, it would make them longer, and
Yeah, but
that wouldn't look like a bird wing.
Yeah. But then you're limited because of the size of that, how far you go.
Yes. And I've done it, in fact,
Amazing.
the first one I did today, I think I went way too far. You know, I think this actually, to me, looks like a bird wing.
Mm-hmm.
And
the indigo actually looks terrific.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's,
well, we'll see.
it's not overpowering.
There are a couple ways if you want to do it on paper. You hold it on opposite ends. One is you can dip it down and just start in the middle. Here, if you're going to do it, you can start in the middle and make sure that the corners are covered. The classic way of doing it is to hold it like this, put one end down, and put it on the surface, which takes a little practice. okay, which we'll talk about in a minute. Practice. Okay, so I'm going to do it more the classic way. Make sure your corners are in. And it's pretty much an instant print. And the thing is that you want to be very gentle in the way you do this, because if you disturb the carrageen and the surface, you get a wave in the pattern. And so you want to be just nice and consistent. And so, pretty good print.
It's a really good print. And I love the way the thing that you thought was going to be a problem is not at all
Yeah.
a problem.
So now what I'm going to do is when you take that off, either color sloshes back on your print or the carrageen, as it dries, will form like a white haze. So you very gently want to wash off your print. Or what we'll be doing is we'll just very gently wash off our turned object.
With water.
With water. And this is a pretty good print. You know, and what you look for is the color attractive? Is that what you want? Are the patterns crisp and sharp? Are there any holes in it? Now here, the white here, there is white paint, but the white here is actually the paper
Showing through.
underneath. But it looks okay.
Yeah.
If you were a professional marbler, that would be an error. But here, I think it sort of adds to the... So now we're going to clean the surface.
I do too.
It's like a predominant blue pattern.
Yeah,
Yeah, some you have a lot of blue in there.
I mean, the dark edges of the indigo don't bother me at all.
No, I think they look really nice. And comfortable.
Yeah,
So
kind of
the
random.
prominent color is that lighter blue. Is that based on the order that it was
No.
put on?
No. It's, well, there are different philosophies. The black is the first, the red is the second if you're using it. There seems to be a consensus among marblers that it does not make any difference
Oh, really?
as to
Huh.
how you,
What would the red have done to that?
it would have,
Overwhelmed.
no,
Well, he
No.
put some red in, didn't he?
He put in the one below
Russet.
ochre, the brick color.
Oh, he
Russet.
didn't put any of the other?
No.
Oh, I thought at one point he put a little tiny bit.
no.
You want this back?
Pardon?
You could be back so it doesn't dry.
I'm gonna run the ladies, I'll be right back. Keep going.
Did you get that on the audio?
What, sir?
He's recording everything he says.
Well, Hannah is going. Let's do one with red. Let's see
That's
what
when
it
you
looks
edit. Now, we saw how the white showed through, but if you're using a dark piece of wood,
Yes.
would that make it look weird, less attractive than the white?
Okay, so part of it is,
Well, that's what's going to be interesting to see, that little piece that looks like white on mine.
it depends on what you want out of your wood piece. If you put a lot of paint on, you won't see the grain. If you, and part of it is balancing the amount of paint you have with how much of the wood you want to cover and how much of the grain you want to see and whether you have grain on the piece and all of that.
I noticed the difference here. Look where you don't have any other paint, how the
Yeah.
blue does versus how the blue does.
Yeah.
Jan, if you have a dark piece of wood, walnut, would it be better to use a dark piece of paper to check your pattern out if you were going over walnut? Instead of a white piece?
Instead of what?
I use a dark piece of paper to represent the walnut and then put your pattern on that
When you do a test.
when you
do a
do your
test?
test. Or do you do that automatically?
I can't do this and talk. I'm sorry. I never,
I don't think he's ever done it on paper, so he doesn't know.
Splash of yellow. I
yeah, I think I'm gonna try.
So yellow's a light color, so that's the last one
Not
last one
necessarily.
goes on, or it's not like dyes and inks, the lightest color is the last color.
Yellow
that's
really
On
shows
that,
up on our paint,
on this one,
if you put yellow in it.
Yeah, but if you,
you know, this one,
Mine had yellow in it, not like that.
I actually didn't put that much yellow on it.
Yeah, that's,
And that was just a test. And I sort of like that.
because I know last time I did it, I put yellow.
that's,
It didn't come out like that, but the yellow
that reminds me
definitely.
of the 60s, the go-go dancers outfit.
But yellow definitely shows up in
Nancy
everything.
Sinatra. Okay, so he's only doing half, he's gonna do two.
Yeah, just, it's
The
easier.
Bob experiment. Oh,
No, he's just doing.
Okay.
He's just doing color.
Okay,
It's
I'm
a
going
test.
to do a classic one on this, just so we can compare it. And the yeah, this takes a little bit of time and patience to do this, but I sort of enjoy it. And part of it is you want to, you don't want a lot of drag in this. And I think it was John Lawton who said, oh, you know, you put one of these with 5 of them in, you just do 2. Well, you get too much drag.
and
You
drag
don't
is
get-
like rippling? Is that what that means?
It doesn't make the pattern crisp.
Ah, okay.
So, okay, see now I have something in here that is a hair or a piece of dust,
Oh, yeah.
and you get that kind of aberration.
But you just went straight back with that.
Yes. But there was something that
Yeah,
picked it up
that-
here.
Well, if you
Yeah,
look
a
back-
little bit over there
You
too.
look
like-
back at the top, you can see little spots of whatever. See?
Yeah,
Whatever.
But when you do the next rake, it will make that less prominent.
We'll see.
I mean, if it drags it deep.
Look, the yellow became into a lighter green. And that's what it looks like.
Well, and sometimes it's hard to tell the
What you're
pattern
gonna
when you-
get,
Was that the two pieces there? that
Yeah,
got
it's-
so good at?
totally indistinguishable.
Well,
now.
these are a little bit longer. The loops seem to be a little
Yeah,
bit
no, I was just,
longer.
if that was where that piece was.
That looked like the just drop on it technique.
I did.
Because it's a small piece of.
I don't, you know, I can't talk and do that. You know, it's sort of like almost meditation.
Much more pastel color.
Yes.
Because the red turned
Okay.
pink.
You know, that's why it's hard to control the red.
Wow, yeah.
You got
Or
that dark green spot right there.
Yeah. It's,
But I wouldn't say it's an aberration or a problem, anything on there. I know as a perfectionist you might, but
You just make your bowl in the middle a little bit bigger.
Now, if you were to put another piece of paper over top of this, what would you get?
well, what I call
I mean,
it,
I know you get a big white spot right there.
I would call it a crappy pattern. You know, well, you know, okay, for me, if you're going to do this,
Well, what I'm getting at is, it looks like it's still got a lot of paint on it.
right,
Forget the pattern, it looks like it's still got a lot of paint on
it
it.
does.
Would it cover the paper
No.
with this much paint on it?
No.
No, okay, that's what I was getting at.
Because
You
you'll
have
see,
you have a lot of paper showing.
well, here, like, here are holes,
Yeah, no, you got that one big.
yeah,
streak
and
on
you
it.
got a big one here, so,
Yeah, that's what I just,
you know, you set this whole thing up. you
Yeah.
know, You're wasting 10 cents of paint. So, you know, let's get the pattern that you want, rather than, you know, something that's sort of like a leftover.
Poor Steph Curry. Covered him in paint and dumped him.
Paper's cheap. This is art. Okay. I am going to do my piece.
Goody.
And
We want to watch,
Something on the bottom of our,
yeah,
so we have something.
but we have time.
Yeah.
okay, so the design of my piece is, this is going to be a bowl, and this is going to be a marbled top
Oh,
bowl.
oh, so you're going to have two
A
that
finial
match.
on top of it.
That's challenging.
Yes.
You're gonna try and do them the same pattern.
Yes.
No. No, I'm just going to marble this,
Oh,
and I'm going to have cherry outside, the wood outside, and just the marbling on the top.
okay.
Okay.
Okay? You know, all of my things, you know, for my design now, you know, I'm a traditionalist in a lot of ways. I like the combination of the wood and something else. And, you know, people who ebonize an entire piece or marble an entire piece, who cares whether it's wood? You know, so I want something that enhances the wood rather than, you know, something that covers the wood. And so this is a dome surface just like your bowls. It's just that it's smaller. And I just, now what I've done here is I've put on the tape because I want the marble to come up over that edge, but I don't want it to splash on the inside. Because when it comes over, you either have to wash it off, so it's hard to take care of the marble surface until it's dry, or you let it dry, and then on this one I can't put it back on the lathe, so I'd have to hand sand it. So I'm putting a mold around it, and I'll eventually marble that, and none of the marbling stuff will get on the surface of my interior. When you do your pieces, you may want to put, you have two choices. One is you can just do it like this and the slosh will come over. You can put it back on the lathe and sand it off. Or now you can take a sponge and get most of it off and then just sand a little bit left. Or you can put a piece of tape around here, put a mold on it, and then you'll get less or none on the outside. So, okay, real time. Okay, so I'm going to do this a couple of times.
I have to assume carrageenan is not harsh to your skin.
Not if you can eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's, you've eaten it.
So many things though are dry, and this looks like,
The alum
It's
is
gentle.
actually used to, in the pickling process, so it's a food substance. Okay, so I have all kinds of little bubbles here I'm going to get rid of. Check, make sure the surface is
Calm.
clean. Now, this is a fairly small piece, so
You saved me a corner.
You save your little.
Oh, you have
So I
four.
go get one.
the knobs.
That's right, yeah.
They look like mushrooms.
now there's not that much paint in these containers, but you don't have to get much paint on your brushes.
Otherwise you get too much.
Well, you'll get bigger
Bigger circle.
dots.
Same as flicking that other
I was
paper.
gonna say, yeah, trying to do the,
I was out sanding in the backyard and there's gold paint all over our outside furniture. You can't, only I would know what it was, but from,
whole new design.
I had about 10 minutes of sunshine to sand outside before the clouds came back. Here he comes.
Did he put little ones in last time we did it?
Yeah.
Like that's the line, I don't-
and you're making a bigger palette, if you will, than you need, because once you do the raking and the combing, you might decide you want to go in a certain direction. Okay.
So I'm doing more than I need. I'm not going all out to the corners.
Even though Bob wants your corner.
Now, some of you have larger pieces, and I would suggest you do go out to the corners.
Why are the emergency lights on?
Oh, I turned them on. I forgot to turn them off.
It's that,
Bob, if I remember right, the last time we did this, you had a little piece
Before I
like
put
that
all
in
the
your hand,
lights
and
out, it's this one,
you stole
right?
that little corner.
yeah, that's it. So is this going to be the color palette of the piece on the left? Similar?
I don't know.
I know, I wanted you to one on
Yeah,
left.
I want the left too, but he's not going to tell us what his
I
secret
know.
recipe
He doesn't
is.
remember.
He does. He's pretending.
Usually he writes it on the back of this test
Mhm.
piece.
Yeah.
He said he had it written somewhere.
That one may have that Vardanian too.
Oh, I know, it's yellow. It's like a piece of yellow.
Except when we did it last time, I remember the yellow really.
Yeah, I put yellow in mine.
I didn't expect to like it, and it
Yeah.
just is a little bit of interest.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
The same thing. But mine was lighter color, I'm not darker this time.
Can't remember what mine was. I tried to copy that last time.
Okay, I'm going to stay away from the green and the indigo. Put a little turquoise in it.
Oh, now I see it. You have to get close to see. Okay, the yellow has turned almost green.
Well, the way it looks on here, it will be different than
Yeah.
the,
Oh, this is my favorite color.
and you really have to discipline yourselves to stir every time.
So the paints aren't water-based, because otherwise it would be a problem when you rinse. Correct?
No, not water. It washes everything off with water.
Yeah.
Put some more of that on?
So you do ochre at two different stages?
I thought I might put a little more on.
It seems like your blue is kind of
Yeah, very
in these
circular.
areas.
Yeah, it's, and the black shape, actually the black is sort of on the outside, rather than, I don't know why.
Oh, here it is.
Ah, thank you. Okay. Ooh. Here we go.
The black is medium. This is good.
It is really nice. Last time we had 8 or 10.
At least, yeah.
So Kim is doing something for the Abunda Arts Council, and she marbled some little orbs for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Is she gonna do her platter class or drop it? Or you
I don't know. I didn't say anything because Judy asked me not to say. she found out.
It seems to be mixing the blue in there.
Yeah, it's bringing the blue back up. So when I talked to the PG&E guys this morning, I said, thank you so much, I hope this is the end of all your emergency work. And he said, oh no, we got another big one coming in Sunday and Monday.
Really?
Yes. I said, oh,
I thought the news that this was the end.
no, I'm told the storm window will close April 5th. But there is in fact a storm coming Sunday.
I thought it was until like Tuesday. Sometime coming up.
Another one is coming.
Something.
Yeah, you got something there.
But when you do the next, it may go away.
It's hiding.
Yep, it made it go away.
The other one, which is neat.
So you didn't do the corners, but stuff got there, but
Yeah.
it's large. It's not as mixed in, I mean, it's kind of dark colors.
It's gonna have some white in it.
Good, bad, or indifferent? I'm
You
gonna
ready?
print on a piece of paper, I think.
It's
Really?
not what you,
You can always wash it off your wood.
Go on, go for it.
You want to go for it? Yeah, go.
Let's see, you get the corner.
I didn't get it in there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Get over the edges.
You want it on the back too?
And the back don't make any difference.
You want to do any more?
Whatever effect.
Okay. Let me get rid of this.
Where's your piece?
You
What
got
color
the,
do you want your top
got
to
the
be? Or you don't really know?
concave
You just
rim.
experiment.
so it's gonna be a little,
The top,
Well,
your
Oh, well,
did it
I, you know,
roll it from the
I
pad to
thought
get
I
the
would
air
just
out.
you know, I
get
get it all
more
right, and I looked at it, and I thought, and I came in here,
Russet,
the day they're setting up.
and then with a little bit of color in it.
But
But
I already had done it,
I don't know
so,
why the black didn't.
so if you couldn't do
Oh,
it,
you have big
I would
shuttles.
have taken it home and finished
And
it.
this is why I say,
But he said
you
you
know,
can
this
do
is
it, but it's
somewhat
more
of a-
complicated.
yeah.
That's why it has to be newspaper.
But your piece came out beautiful.
It's art,
I
not
remember
science.
as you were
as
doing
they
that,
say.
I remember that, I did that before. What, was it 2 years ago?
I don't know, I don't remember.
Oh, now we're gonna get Boris Johnson all good. It's wonderful.
okay.
Even better.
And you had some small pieces and you took those corners.
Looks
I
like
thought
there's
that was
something
really
of a
great.
hair there.
Yeah.
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 Not letting it go to waste.
No,
I just don't have any room to set this up
Yeah, it's
like this
a
in my shop.
little spot.
you have room?
I do not have any room, I got so much stuff in there.
But you can pick it up with your finger.
I gave a car to my son so I could increase the size of my shop. But he has
Okay.
It's just, it's been deal.
I'm going to take a break, and whoever wants to be up next, the coaching I...
So what was the first thing you put on again?
Workable fixative. And so you do either UV resistant or just a regular gloss.
And you're just
And then
putting
if-
that on this part,
No,
or you put on the whole entire thing?
I do the whole thing, or I've done the whole thing. And then if you want a matte finish, then you do a final coat of matte. This takes a little practice to use these. You know, I find when you first use the can, you get a nice spray. The less pressure that you have, and then it begins to spit. So
When it spits, do you just use something to smooth
throw
it?
it out.
Throw it out and start, okay.
Or you don't use it when it spits.
Don't use it when it gets cold either.
Yeah. And and that's what I think I'd probably finish this one with. Lately, I've just been using wipe on poly.
After that stuff?
No,
Oh, just instead of?
You do the fixative
Workable.
I have done a fixative,
and then wipe.
and then
wipe.
I finish the piece. And then I just use wipe on poly now.